What's up, Devy peoples? It is your host, EK, and welcome back to the Devy Dose. We have a slamming show for you tonight. We have the one, the only, Austin at Devy Deets in the house. Woo! What's going on, Austin? How you feeling?
Woo! Hey, thanks for having me on. It's the first time I think I've gotten applause in an intro, so that was great. Future hosts that I'm on, take note. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Really excited to talk some freshmen here with you, which is my favorite topic to discuss, I think.
Yeah, man. It is fun. It is a wide world out there. If you're talking about Austin failed this year because he didn't get to 100 players graded the position. I want to put that all out there. I know we have high expectations, Austin. I just want to take him down a couple of pegs before we get too far.
I liked how we started, and then the second part maybe is not the best follow up. So now I'm cautiously optimistic about the rest of it.
And keep you on your toes. Is he nice? is he beating you up? We don't know what's going on.
That's how you get the best out of me. It's true.
This is a life lesson, kids. So I know you said this is your favorite position to scout. You want to touch on that for a couple seconds before we get into the nitty-gritties?
Yeah, I think it's the most fun for me because I think quarterback's such a crapshoot. So while that one's a fun one to kind of figure out, just know you're going to be wrong like all the time. And running backs, I feel like for a lot of these guys, you're kind of looking for the same thing. I mean, you're either kind of a workhorse bell cow guy, you're kind of a satellite type back. So, but the wide receivers, there's like 8 different archetypes that can be really, really good. We're talking about even like slot, you can talk about, like a small shifty slot. You can talk about a big slot. You can talk about more of like the average athlete, average size, like a la, JSN kind of slot. Like you got, alphas on the boundary. You've got route runners. I mean, it's a ton of different guys. There's a ton of different ways to succeed. So I think that's the most fun. And unlike a lot of other positions, I think, especially with the evolution of 7v7 football and just starting these guys at such a young age with like advanced training, that by now you see a lot of these high school kids and they've got some savvy to them already. They've got, a release package. They've got, a more diverse route tree sometimes than just goes and slants and bubble screens. Like it's just a lot of fun for me. You never know what you're going to get when you turn on the tape for some of these guys. And that's what makes it the most interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm right there with you. It's a ton of fun to scout the position. And there's some guys in this class that, frankly, I'm not obviously as deep in it as you are yet, but there's some guys that look like they could step onto an NFL field tomorrow and get a job. You know what I mean? Maybe not step into a Pro Bowl, but, hang and, look the part. So, really, really intrigued in this class. So let's fire it off and just viewers out there, we're going to talk Austin's top guys, and we're not talking campus to Canton rankings. We do love them. You guys should all be subscribed already if you're watching this. You should have already read the freshman guide, the supplemental guide, the Devy guide, all the awesome content that comes out of campus to Canton. But we're going to talk Austin's rankings tonight, top guys, the second phase after that, and then a few sleepers that he wants to throw out there, a few crumbs that he wants to leave for the rest of us to pounce on. So Austin, it's your lead, my man. Who's first?
Yeah, so I want to clarify this real quick before we jump into it. So we lock, much like 24/7 does, or On 3 under them, like they kind of lock their rankings after like that signing day. And then they don't edit them anymore. We do the same thing with our pure freshman rankings at C2C. So once we release the freshman guide on March 1st, our rankings lock. So we can't react to like spring news or any of those kinds of things. So while I have my top 10 here and I have my grades, there has been some minor movement within it already. And I'll talk about that when we get to Carnell Tate, for example, is a guy that's jumped up for me here. I'm all in at this point. But my top guy in the class is Makai Lemon, or at least was as of March 1st was Makai Lemon. He's going to USC, listed as an athlete, I believe, for at least the majority of the recruiting cycle. Right around. So I will be upfront. I'm a sucker for a wide receiver that is 6 foot, 180, Probably can play like flanker or slot, like kind of outside inside versatility, and then like has a lot of like short intermediate possession type attributes to their game. And Makai Lemon fits that to a T. He is kind of Jordan Addison-ish with the role that I think he can fulfill there for the Trojans, and probably not as a freshman, but moving forward. And you can see him here lined up in the slot, just running like this little wheel route out of the slot. I mean, that's terrible coverage, but you can see his movement skills in the open field here. Loose hips, a little more physical than I think people give him credit for. And I think the thing that really kind of tie breaks it for me with him, or it did, was that he played with his future quarterback in high school. Him and Malachi Nelson are already buds. I think that means a lot for developing rapport in college. You can see, a little screen here, just how quickly he changes direction, turns upfield. You can see a lot of the movement skills stuff here with him. Just a very loose athlete that is just, plucks the ball out of the air, good hands on the perimeter here. So I think the versatility is a big thing for him. And again, the chemistry with his future quarterback. And that's kind of what pushed him to the very top for me.
Yeah, no, I liked Lemon's film a lot. I didn't get him as high as you, but you get a lot more experience in evaluator as well. But I loved his ability to pluck the ball out of the air. I really think he attacks it well. And I thought he showed some really nice body control for a high school kid on some of these clips here, which I didn't really find any of the other top guys in this class to have those traits in the way that Lemon did. So I get it. I love it. You're a little spicy right off the rip. I don't think most people have Lemon at 1 right now. Certainly not most of the services. So yeah, man, that's awesome. Anything else on Lemon before we move on?
No, and I think the other thing you just talked about there, like that extension, good catching technique, attacking the ball while it's in the air instead of letting it come to you, I think is actually one of the most important skills a wide receiver can have. And it seems to be kind of an innate thing. Like guys that don't do it in high school don't tend to learn it. And so I do like that about him. And I'm glad that you brought that up. He's a guy that one of the better guys in the class at just kind of attacking that ball. And it just sets you up for whatever your next move is so well.
Yeah, it reminds me just of the elite wide receivers and scouting their college tape. They all the really elite guys, like the Garrett Wilsons, the Olaves, like they all have that trait, the snatching of the air. And most of these other guys, I didn't really see that as much. There's a few other guys here that can do the short routes, the intermediate, the long, the deep threat. But yeah, I think I definitely get you with Lemon being, a cut ahead of some of the other guys. Okay, so number 2 for Austin.
Yeah, drum roll. So at this point, I have moved Jonte Cook to my wide receiver 1 in the class. But as of release date, he was not. He was barely behind.
Yeah, I saw some crazy Twitter posts from this guy that took Jonte Cook in the middle of the first round ahead of the QB3, QB4, the RB1.
That guy is insane. And that guy actually is really insane because I have no quarterbacks on that roster. So,
quarterbacks are overrated.
I'll find another one later. Be damned. I think Jonte Cook is actually probably like my guy in the class, and he's highly rated, so it's kind of hard to say that. But I watched this kid, and he just ate that cushion up on that DB in like 2 seconds flat.
Yeah.
Like he knows how to attack defenders. He understands just like football, like how to vary his route stems so that he kind of keeps defenders off balance, flip those hips, get you turning the opposite direction. He'll dabble a little bit in kind of finding that blind spot on DBs at times. He's got explosive downfield speed. I think he has, of any receiver in this class, the ability to play X, Y, and Z, and you can use him short, intermediate, or deep, and he will probably excel at every single one of those roles. Then he went to Texas and got rave reviews through spring.
Yep.
I think it's going to be almost impossible to keep this dude off the field, a guy that mega produced at the highest level of high school football in Texas. And I kind of like, he's got like this personality to him as well that I think wide receivers almost have to have. Like you saw those videos of him during recruiting where he went to Texas A&M and he was like, where are all the trophies? Like he did like an Instagram live or whatever. He's like, there's no football trophies in the case here. The trophy case was behind him. He was dogging Texas on theirs as well and ended up going there anyway. But he just seems like the kind of kid that like has supreme confidence in himself and for good reason.
Swagger.
Like he's just good. Yes,
he's got the swagger.
He's got swag. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it, man. Definitely some versatility. I thought he was one of the best of this top group, really at finding the soft spot in zone. I didn't find that a lot of these, maybe just a lot of high schools aren't playing a lot of zone, but I didn't really see anyone else like quite have that knack for sitting down just as well as he did. I mean, again, like, you know, electric deep threat, awesome with the ball in his hand. Yes, I had him at 2. I totally get the hype. And all right, so I think this is a philosophical discussion. Do we overreact too much to spring camp hype?
Yeah, I try not to. I think the kind of hype that I react to is, well, there's certain programs that like it's probably bullcrap, and then there's some that it's probably not. Texas seems to be one of those that generally, if the coaching staff likes a kid, they'll say it. Ohio State's actually another one. So when we talk about Carnell Tate in a minute, that's the big talking point for him. But I just think his versatility and the fact that they like him so much, if there is an injury anywhere, he is probably the 4th receiver on the depth chart right now, like just total. Anybody goes down, I think he just steps into that role. And I just don't know that he gives it back, to be honest. Like he's so dynamic. And I think if something were to happen early in the season, he gets plugged into the slot, he could end up with 800 to 1,000 yards this year. That would not shock me a single bit at all.
Yeah, spicy, man. I like it. All right, anything else on Cook?
No, I think that about covers it. Love him. Good luck getting him in any of the leagues you're in with me. I will overdraft him, like you just said, way too early. I'm doing it.
I've seen it. There's proof. The man's not lying. Okay. How about number 3?
Yeah, Zach Branch is number 3 for me. You said Cook is your number 2. Is Branch your number 1?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Just looks like fucking Jalen Waddle out there already. You know, when he's 18 years old.
His vision and kind of just natural feel for, you know, cutback lanes and things like that in the open field is pretty dang special. And you can see kick returns and stuff. And I think he can do kick punt return stuff day one and be one of the better guys in the Pac-12, kind of how Barry and Brown was last year for Kentucky. I do think the only thing that knocked him down to 3 for me, because I think, you know, the athletic ability is awesome. No issues with like his hands or anything like that, like you kind of see out of some of these smaller guys. I just think he's slot only. And while I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, you notice when we talked about Lemon and Cook, I said, you know, I think they can play inside out and outside. And they're not quite the athletes Zach Branch is, but they're pretty dang good in their own right. So that's the only thing that knocked him down to 3 for me. But again, it's barely. Like they were all within like a very close grade for each other in our ranking system at C2C. And I do think Branch end up as our wide receiver 1 as a group consensus. So I might have been the low guy at C2C having him at 3. So that kind of tells you the quality of player that he is. The Waddle, just like can't unsee Waddle is what probably put him at 1 for you.
Well, he had so many. I thought he had awesome hands. There's a clip in here somewhere where he is just positively horizontal, snatching the ball on like the 1 yard line from a terrible, terrible throw. I thought that just adjustment, the ability to extend and get it. Like I'm a sucker for those things. But the rack ability, the explosiveness. I mean, he's just playing at a different speed than these other kids. I do hear you on the 2 bigger guys being more versatile, right? Like he you know, Branch probably isn't going to run in and start playing X receiver, you know, be a boundary guy most of these programs. So do you think Lemon gets on the field before him at USC, or do you think Branch's special teams ability kind of gives him an edge for playing time?
Yeah, I think if we're just talking like getting any sort of touches, special teams included, then I think Branch sees the field first. But the nice thing about USC is that I think they'll be in enough early blowouts that I think they'll both probably see some snaps within the first handful of games. So I'll be interested to see what their receiver rotation looks like. I don't really know what to expect out of them this year, in all honesty. It's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, so who's going to be the starting X there? Do they get a transfer, right? Did they get a transfer again this year?
Yeah, they have Dorian Singer who came in from
Oh,
Arizona.
Singer's really good too.
They've got Brendan Rice who probably factors in a little bit. Taj Washington. You've got the two
Yeah,
freshmen. Like
yeah,
there's
Mario
there,
Williams, right?
yeah, there's like enough guys there, and none of them are stars, but they're all good enough that it's just like, how much do we see these guys? But I do think there'll be enough volume and stuff to kind of keep these guys at least on our minds through the first few weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you. Love to see them get on the field early. Got to keep those zeros out of our rosters. Keep the zeros away.
Please.
A lemon a day keeps the zeros away.
And that is a legitimate concern with Makai Lemon, and we don't have to dive too deep into the year 1-0 stuff, but that is a legitimate concern with him, that he just doesn't quite get enough snaps this year.
Yeah. I mean, I know math is math, right? Like, we're doing data processing, we should just do it. But do we cut these guys a break if they're coming into an absolutely loaded depth chart? Like, do you knock Brandon Innis if he doesn't get significant playing time this year?
So my approach is that I just don't make excuses. The only guys I've made excuses for were the Pac-12 guys a couple years ago when there was COVID and they played like 4 games. So like I gave those guys a pass because that's whatever. But I think generally, if you're good enough, like Jamison Williams is the example that I always use. He was not a zero at Ohio State his freshman year. He had over 100 yards receiving, even though they had all those dudes there, and all like the Judy, Waddle, Devonta Smith, Ruggs. None of them were zeros. Like, I tend to think if you're good enough in a blowout, you'll get enough reps to make it to a threshold. So I'm not going to cut them any slack, but I do think it's just something to note, and you should be thinking about it when you're drafting some of these guys.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like number 4 is the end of your top tier. So you want to what do you got? What do you got on our man Innis? Kind of dropped the hint there a little bit, but it's fire away.
I this was the last guy. He was like a borderline tier 1, tier 2 guy for me at the very end of the cycle. I kind of bumped him up to that tier 1. He's just really, really refined for a high schooler. And you can see from a bunch of these clips, just, very little wasted body movement with him. I think of all the players in this class, he probably has one of the better release packages already, which is impressive. I think he's physical after the catch. He's kind of has a little bit of that Josh Downs. To see those loose hips there on that little double move. Josh Downs was a smaller guy who was really good in the red zone. And I think Innis is a little bigger than him, but he kind of has that same my ball mentality. He can win some of those contested catch situations. So I actually think he is a boundary receiver, but he could play in the slot kind of like they had Garrett Wilson do there, where he can play both, and that's just kind of the spot they had for him. But I think Ohio State really likes him. I think he's better than Noah Rogers for sure. And maybe not Tate at this point, but I think of the group that comes in this year, he's probably the second best. And really, their wide receiver depth isn't very good at Ohio State. People don't really necessarily know that. It's Abuka Harrison, and then Fleming and Ballard are like okay. They kind of have their role, and then they don't have anything else. So I do think we're going to see, because Ohio State tends to do those hockey rotations sometimes. I do think we'll see Innis. I think we'll see Tate. And we might even see some Rogers this year. I think we'll get a healthy dose of all of them.
Are you feeling like Tate and Innis, do we compare them to Mbuka and Harrison a little bit, or is that too far flung for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I am, direct one-on-one comparison, probably not. They're a little different, but like in terms of what I think they can do as freshmen and the roles they can step into right away year 2, I absolutely think that they can do that. And like Harrison and Mbuka, we kind of got that bowl game at the end of the year. And like, let's be honest, if Ohio State isn't in the playoff, Marvin Harrison ain't playing that game, and Emeka Egbuka probably ain't playing that game either. So we will probably get to see some of those guys, and there's definitely a chance where it's just round 2 with the kind of explosive breakouts in that game, and then we just know what to expect the next year.
Yeah. I love it. And I liked Innis a lot, and I'm sad the first supplemental I passed on Innis, and I took Dickey because I was just worried about Innis getting on the field, right? And I feel like Oregon's a lot softer of a depth chart. and I hadn't done any work on any of these guys yet. And then I just think Innis is very polished for high school. I really thought he had sophistication in his routes and the way that very few of these guys did. So I think I'm going to be very high on him as well and not repeat that mistake. Stupid Eric. All right. Speaking of the devil, so now we're in your tier 2, and I don't know how you want to play this. I was thinking like top 10, and then maybe we skip through the 10 through 20 a little bit. Perfect. Whoever you want to highlight there, and then do some late guys. But like Jurian Dickey.
I really, really like Jurian Dickey, and I've gone back and forth on exactly how high I am on him. I actually got to interview him last year. A really nice kid. Really likes to fish. So that's kind of why he ended up choosing Oregon. He's like a really big outdoorsy guy. He is kind of AJ Brownish. Like he's 6'3". He's 200-ish pounds. He's a bully. He's surprisingly quick. He doesn't really know how to separate yet. Like he doesn't create a ton of separation outside of being a little bit physical. And my only other concern with him really was that he's kind of had some, not like major knee injuries, but like kind of like, I think he injured his meniscus one year and had an issue with his other knee like the year before or something like that. So he's had some dings over the past couple of years that are mildly concerning. But I think he has the skills to play pretty quickly at Oregon. Gary Bryant Jr. transferring in there. I don't know exactly what their depth chart's going to look like now. But I mean, you can see him, like, it just physicality is how he's basically separating on some of these. He's just kind of, he's bigger than you. He's faster than you. Kind of a weird little whip route that he runs there. Not super refined, but it just doesn't quite matter. And if he does learn those things, then there's a chance that he could be the best wide receiver in this class. But just being slightly less refined than with some of these other guys is what just kind of knocked him to 5, which is still, a great spot for him. And I like him, late first, early second of supplemental drafts. I think is really a sweet spot for him.
Yeah, that's where I took him. I took him at like 202 or something.
Yeah, that's great value.
Yeah. I think he's got a great catch radius and he uses it. You definitely see him like pluck the ball out of the air. I see him high point it, which some of the other big guys here, like Hakeem Williams, we'll talk about later. I hate high pointer. No, everything drops in the basket with him. And I didn't see that with Dickey. So I think as much as he is bigger, faster, stronger, and that's like my first note on him, he just looks like a grown man playing with like middle school kids.
He's the rare guy that you don't need the huddle circle. Like you just don't need it. Before this year, it's like, oh, there he is. He's just
he just ruined that like kid's high school career.
He's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, but at least he has the rudiments of technique coming. Like, he's not like, doesn't have like good hip dip and things like that, or not his breaks, but the beginnings of it are forming. So, here's the question: can Oregon develop a wide receiver?
Yeah, they've really failed to do it. I'll be interested to see what their new offensive coordinator will do with it. Will Stein. He's had some success. He came over from UTSA, right? And they've taken some kind of bottom of the barrel, recruits. Ja'Cory Clark, Zachary Franklin, Cephas, and made them, pretty good. So I'm wondering if you get a better talent in his hands, what exactly they end up looking like. Yeah.
That gives me some hope because Franklin, for all the talent, he hasn't put it all together, and tons of raw talent for Franklin too, but hasn't put the pieces together.
Yeah.
So, all right. This is the riser so far this spring, I would say. Would you say that's accurate?
100%. Yeah.
So Carnell Tate, what you got?
Yeah, so he was a really tough eval for me through the process, and I ended up having him at wide receiver 6. The tough thing with some of these IMG guys is that IMG Academy, they play like this ridiculous like traveling schedule every year. Like they're like the Harlem Globetrotters. They just go everywhere and play whoever. But there's not a lot of tape. You have to find full games that were televised, and we're lucky enough that our recruiting team will record them and do some cut-ups for us to watch in the background. So, and it's hard. You can't find any stats on these guys really either. Like it's really hard to find that. So you watch some clips and you're like, well, I mean, like he looks pretty good, but like he's on an all-star team. Like every guy around him is probably like a 4-star. But I think the things that were encouraging with him, like he has a lot of kick return experience. I mean, you can see it here, kick punt returns, and he was really, really good at it. So that kind of gives you some hope. He went to one of the 2 all-star games. I forget which one, and was very, very good there. And then went to Ohio State and lost his black stripe first. And like, again, Ohio State's a school that doesn't mess around. Like if the guy's bad, they just don't say it. Like you just don't hear anything about them. I mean, last year during camp, who do we not hear anything about? Caleb Burton, Count Grays, who I loved, Caleb Brown, Kojo Antwi. Didn't hear a peep about these guys. You know who you heard about the year before, though? Heard a ton about Marvin Harrison. Heard a ton about JSM when he came in. Like if they like a guy, they talk about him. And they've raved about Tate. I think there's a legitimate chance by the end of the year that he is their 3rd starting wide receiver because Fleming can't stay healthy and Ballard basically. You like Ballard, I like Ballard too, but he really has one role and it's deep.
Yeah,
and that's he doesn't do a lot else. I think Tate offers a little more. So he's moved up. He's my wide receiver 3 in the class now, and I'm trying to get him everywhere. I still think there's a little bit of a discount with him where people haven't quite caught on to where he should be drafted.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, so I'm in some draft right now, and I was like, all right, so Ballard, a little bit of hype this spring, right? Like a little bit, some positive. Oh yeah, breakout season, right? And then I watch and everything that everyone says about it, the wide receiver coach, doing some of his teammates are like, yeah, so much talent. As soon as he figures out how to run routes, he's going to be dangerous. And it's like, or the coach was saying, yeah, what we've been telling him is he's come a long way and he's doing really good, but just you got to be able to do everything. You need to be the complete wide receiver to be able to start at Ohio State. And it was all just like damning with faint praise. I mean, whatever. Take a flyer on him in like the 30th round of your startup or whatever. Hope he pulls a Jameson, but I don't think it's gonna, whatever. Maybe he's like a day 3 guy, deep threat NFL, unless he really, has a sea change this year. But it's so funny when they're like trying to be supportive, but they're like, it's what they're not saying is so damning. All right, so I think we got your number 7 fired up here.
Yeah, and I do want to say Jalen Hale is my wide receiver 7 based purely on talent, but I can't think of a scenario where I'm comfortable taking him as like the wide receiver 7 off the board in drafts.
Yeah.
Just because the Alabama wide receiver room is just so crowded right now. And I don't know that there's like a star amongst them. It's like a bunch of dudes who are almost equally talented. A bunch of them play like almost the same exact role. But I do like Hale. And, he's got really nice size. He's 6'2", 175. I think he's probably a boundary guy. You see him lined up in the slot there, but I don't think the slot's his position long term unless he turns into like a Jordan Matthews kind of guy.
Right.
He's pretty tough. He's got pretty loose hips. Like he's got some of those qualities about him. The long speed is okay. It's not amazing. So is he a deep guy or a home run threat? I'm not entirely sure. He almost is like John Mechie, in my opinion. Like I think that's kind of a comp for him and another Alabama guy there in the role that he could play at Alabama if he secures snaps there. But there was just nothing about him that's like elite, in my opinion. I'm not blown away by him. And there were, again, another guy that there was like no news about him out of spring. So I am very worried that he's just going to get buried there and we never really hear from him again. So I have him wide receiver 7. I do think he's very talented. At the same time, I think he's generally a guy that I will probably let somebody else draft just purely based on the uncertainty. Because I mean, he is, pretty good in the open field there. He's got some, he's got some traits. He's got some traits you like.
Yeah, he's got some size. He's got some length. Definitely shedding some tackles and running away from guys. But yeah, I mean, that's my fear of these guys. A few drafts where you are taking shots on, the Caleb Browns of the world and the Jalen Ballards of the world. You start to get a little bit wary of, the second and third names, third, fourth names that commit to these, super schools, or just the ones that are, don't have a differentiating trait to separate themselves from the rest of them. And I think you're right, man. Alabama's just, they're all talented players, but there's just not a superstar there. Like, does Ja'Cory Brooks take another step? Does someone else, really emerge? I mean, Malik Benson, I guess you guys are pretty excited about. But at least he's got something different than the other guys there, right?
Yeah, and again, a guy that the staff and like all the folks, because they do some fairly open practices at Bama, we're all saying looked like one of the better guys out there. So yeah, I mean, you just heard nothing about Hale. It's very, very worrying, and you have to spend like a second round pick on some of these guys. Like, I would just rather wait to take Jaron Hamilton, also going to Alabama, like 6 rounds later, if I'm just going to shoot for a Bama upside freshman. I don't want to spend the premium capital and have it all like worthless by next year, because if he does nothing this year, he's toxic going into next offseason. People will not be buying him.
Yeah, right. And then he's a roster clogger for you. You feel like you can't drop the talent, but not doing anything either. I mean, I think it's a good point too. I mean, if you took shots late on Alabama guys last year, you might have got Kobe Prentice, who had no hype coming in, but then got on the field first. And Malik Benson's maybe killing my Kobe Prentice dreams at this point. I feel like he's usurping the slot role, which makes me sad. But yeah, I mean, at least it was a cheap acquisition. I probably got him off waivers,
exactly.
In the 15th round of a supplemental. Yeah. Do you think there's any hope for Prentice, Austin?
I've been a pretty vocal sell Kobe Prentice guy.
Yeah.
Just because I think his skill set's a little limited. And I actually wrote an article on him. I'd have to go back and read it, but I had like 7 reasons that I was like, end of the season, numbers dipped precipitously. Like, A dot sucked, like a bunch of this stuff. So like, I just think he's like a near the line of scrimmage kind of jitterbug guy. And I just don't tend to roster a lot of those types of players. But I mean, he's not like, I don't think he's bad. If he was at a different school and I felt really good about him being the slot guy for 3 years, I'd probably be a little more in on him than I am with him at Alabama, sadly.
Yeah, he probably winds up being a 4-year Alabama player as a rotational player all 4 years, which is just poison. You don't want to drop him, but can't trade him. It's not doing anything for you. So I think you're right. I've gotten over it. I've moved on. When JoJo transferred, I was like, oh, it's Prentice time, but it did not work out.
Yeah.
All right, so we have here a Tennessee fella.
Yeah. No, LSU fella, right? Shelton Sampson.
Where's he going?
LSU.
Oh, LSU. Exciting. Yeah. Who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Leacock, right?
Leacock, yeah. Who I have just outside my top 10. Yeah. So Shelton Sampson is my biggest hedge ranking of the year because he's a borderline 4 or 5-star guy, depending on where you look. And everyone says he's like this amazing testing athlete. I legit have probably watched Shelton Sampson like 6 times because I just don't see elite athlete anywhere on his tape, really. He's like this big 6'4", kind of tall, lanky, like Quentin Johnston-ish kind of build. Mm-hmm. Like that release is terrible. Like that was not quick feet out of there. Like, yeah, I don't see the 4.4-ish long speed that he's supposed to have.
He launches. Yeah,
there's the movement skills were questionable to me. But I don't want to full fade him just because of the supposed athletic gifts and the fact that he is ranked so highly going to a rather ambiguous wide receiver room at LSU. And he definitely has a size aspect they don't have a ton of there outside of Brian Thomas Jr., who I don't know is like a real barrier to playing if he's actually good. So I like some of the things about him. I like the size. He does have pretty solid yak ability for a 6'4" dude. He can win downfield a little bit. I think early in his career, he's probably like a red zone bubble screen guy, and then we'll figure it out from there. But there is a lot of inconsistency with him. There's a lot of needing to learn how to run routes. And again, I just don't see that top end athletic ability that I see people talking about, but people swear it's there. So, I will believe it up to a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard watching these guys on tape. You just don't know. I feel like with the NFL, even college guys, you're like, all right, he's pulling away from a DB. He's probably got 4.4 speed at that point, right? But high school kids, right? Like, It's tough. It's tough to see. Definitely has some traits, but I think you're right in terms of you're expecting development from him, right? And is he going to a place that's going to develop him? I mean, LSU obviously historically awesome track record, but the Brian Kelly regime, we haven't really. I guess Neighbors took a big step last year.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and you can see in some of these clips, like he just doesn't really understand how to work a defensive back yet. Yeah, like he and a lot of these little short comeback routes, like he's not really setting them up. He just really doesn't quite. He doesn't know how to eat up cushion yet. Like he kind of slow plays it a little bit. Like there's a lot of things for him to work on, and granted, they are things that I think are coachable, which is good. So it's not like he's like running a 4.8 and can't jump. So there are things to like here. And again, it's hard to fade a 5-star kid too much. So he's 8. I like him. Another guy that I don't know that I could take him at cost personally, but I also don't see him going quite that early in drafts so far. So I don't know that you have to take him as like the
Yeah, he's certainly been quite a bit later. I want to say the last one I'm in right now, he was more like a 4th, 5th round pick.
And that's pretty good value there. I mean, then you're okay if he doesn't hit. You didn't invest, a ton into him. But yeah, the second round is pretty rich, and that's where his recruiting pedigree would suggest that he should probably go.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to Austin's number 9 here. Yet another Longhorn, right?
Yep. Head to Texas there. Yeah. DeAndre Moore Jr. He is the most DJ Moore-ish player in this class. Every class usually has 1 or 2. I think he's a slot-only guy. I don't know that he can really play on the boundary. But look at the contact balance. It's just ridiculous. He is a dog, and he loves to play like a dog. Just very, very physical. He's got pretty good hips. There is a chance that he's maybe more Parker Washington than DJ Moore, as with most of these guys that are kind of like that RB build in the slot kind of guys. But I do think he's very talented and very, very athletic. You can see, he's getting the ball in his hands, let him go to work, makes the first guy miss pretty easily. And I think he'll be able to do that in college too. I don't think, it's just a case of him being a high schooler here. Smart player too. If you watch some of his DB stuff, he's pretty good at locating the ball and being pretty physical. So the only concern for him is going to be at Texas. Jordan Whittington is still there in the slot. And I think if something were to happen to Whittington, I think that Jonte Cook gets the first crack at it. So it's not even like he's the next guy there. So I do worry year 1-0 is definitely a possibility for him. But I do like his skill set a lot. I think if he manages to play a little bit this year, I do think he'll be a quarterback's best friend, is kind of just that little safety valve guy.
Yeah, I like a lot of what I see. I didn't get this far in my evaluations yet, unfortunately, but I see the Moore comp, see the Parker Washington for sure. I definitely think he's a little more explosive than Parker, right? I mean, that's why Parker's a day 3 guy, right? And DJ's not, as Parker just doesn't have the juice. Want the kid to succeed, big Parker fan, but I think I like a lot of what I see here. But again, it's hard to invest highly in these guys going into these congested depth charts, and at least if Ohio State, you can say they're going to have 6 or 7 just brutal blowouts this year where they're playing the third stringers by the fourth quarter. But I'm not sure if we're that optimistic about Texas. It could definitely happen, but it definitely didn't happen last year, even with, a generational running back prospect. So
exactly.
Are you bullish on the offense this year or no?
I am. I mean, I was last year too, and it kind of faded. But I think if Quinn doesn't get hurt in that Alabama game, I think we see a completely different Texas offense. He just didn't look right. So I'm hoping another year the offensive line improves. They're pretty much too deep at the wide receiver position. No Bijan, but I think the backfield is pretty solid. So I think that offense is definitely set up to succeed. One thing about Moore, if you got burned by Ajayi Hall, a guy that played at like 4 different high schools and committed to like a bunch of different schools. DeAndre Moore did the same thing. He played at 3 or 4 different high schools and committed to like 3 different schools. I think he was originally committed to USC and then he did Louisville and then flipped to Texas late. So some minor red flags if you're like a believer in that being a harbinger of bad things in the future. So just a noteworthy thing, I think, with a guy like Moore.
Yeah, I mean, that was Zach Evans too, and he turned out fine, But yeah, I hear you. It's always a little bit concerning. Just what's the mental makeup? What's going on there? Does he have outside issues going on?
Because he was at the same school that Makai Lemon and Malachi Nelson were, and he was mad that he wasn't like the leading guy there.
The guy,
yes, and so he went elsewhere. So like. But that's kind of like, well, you didn't want to stay there and compete for a spot with a 5-star quarterback. Like, I don't know, but I think he's super talented. I do like the kid a lot.
Yeah, I would have been almost more interested in him at Louisville, where he would have just been immediately the starter, week 1, blowing up spots, every highlight. But I don't know. At least I think Texas can develop guys. At least, we've had some success from some young players there recently. I like Jatavian's come along quite a bit. Worthy, right? Obviously, tons of talent, but he's come along well. Even Nair, was playing really well last year before he got hurt. So, all right. So rounding out your top 10, and I think this is the only guy I just don't know. I don't know about Hakeem. This was the one guy that I was like, he's just bigger than everyone. I didn't love the film. So why don't you sell me on Hakeem Williams?
Yeah, so this is probably the only guy we'll talk about here tonight that I'll start with the negatives. This dude literally has no idea how to play football at all. And that's not even an exaggeration. I believe of all the wide receivers that our recruiting team has ever charted, he has by far the worst like metrics in basically everything, except for like, yards after the catch, because the dude is just a freaking tank. He is probably like the most big athletic guy that I've ever really watched in high school. Like he runs like a 4.35 or 4.4 or whatever. Like he's super shifty. Really, really intriguing. And he's old. He is like 19, almost 20. So, which does matter. So those are the bad things, and they are obviously really bad. The good things are the things that you can't teach, and that this dude is just the biggest monster I've ever watched in high school. Like every single one of his plays, it just doesn't matter. And, the route running chops, not great, but I like you stick the foot in the dirt and kind of make that hard cut. He's got the hips that are loose enough that I think he could learn how to run routes. I think there's a chance that he doesn't even ever have to, and he's just kind of Martavis Bryant. That's certainly a possibility with how athletic he is. So I have him at 10 just because, like, it's just really hard to find a dude that moves like this at like 220 pounds and 6'4". And he also did show up to Florida State overweight and had to play himself into shape in camp. So there are some definite red flags with this dude, but I just think the athletic upside at some point is just so enticing that you just have to say, like, screw it. Obviously, I'm not taking him as like, a top 5 guy, but you start getting to that 10, 15 wide receiver range. I start to become more interested if I have a roster that allows me to wait and see what happens with him and not just be totally devoid of talent if he doesn't pan out.
Yeah, it feels a little bit to me like watching Derrick Henry play the wide receiver position. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Yeah, and and if he hits, he's the kind of guy that has that like Calvin Johnson-esque upside if he just learns how to actually play the sport, right?
Exactly.
I get it. Anything else on Hakeem?
No, I think my comp was Demaryius Thomas for him. So yeah, I mean, it's that's the kind of guy that he could end up being. If he figures it out a little bit. Yeah, I mean, look, he just changed fields like he's Reggie Bush. Like, what the hell am I watching? just incredible.
Yeah. So I'll ask you this again though too. Can State develop a wide receiver?
I'm starting to like their track record a little more. I think part of their big problem was a talent evaluation and recruiting, and I think that's gotten a lot better. Him and Vandrevius Jacobs, who comes in with him here, are both excellent players. They've done a good job with Johnny Wilson. Some of those other wide receivers were kind of meh, and they're at least like college producers now, which is good. So, I mean, I think, are any of these guys future, like, do I expect stardom? I don't think so, but I do think that things are more encouraging now than they were a few years ago.
I mean, they did something right to get Keon Coleman to transfer, right? I mean, there's a guy that probably had a lot of options to move to.
Wait, did he officially commit there?
I thought he did.
Oh,
No, I
I
mean, you
missed
would know
that.
better than
I
me.
mean, that's
Maybe
great if he's going there. Yeah.
I thought he was, but maybe it was like a speculative thing, and I misread it as fact. But we'll have to look it up after.
Where's our producer? Producer, check that out.
Producer? I'm only one man, Austin. Only Google one thing at a time. All right, so where do you want to go from here? We're 45 minutes in. I don't know what your time commitment looks like. I don't want to hold you hostage. I could do this all night, but I usually assume people want to keep it around an hour. You're gracious enough with your time. So what do you think's the most important things for people that have little or no experience with the freshman class so far to know about 11 through 25?
Yeah.
Or maybe let's drop a couple of 3-star late guys.
Sure. So yeah, I don't want to hold you hostage either here. My next 10 really consists of a lot of guys that are kind of like Hakeem Williams, with varying degrees of knowing how to play football or not. And this is actually kind of I think there's 5 or 6 guys that, according to our athletic database, comp in like the 90th percentile in terms of just raw athleticism. Guys like Cordell Russell is going to TCU. He's got like, he's like 6'3", 200, like crazy basketball dunking highlights, collarbone injury. So he missed part of camp, spring camp, but they seem to like him there. Nathan Leacock, similar at Tennessee, just like, 6'3", 200, like just super athletic guy. Nicholas Harbor. Oh yeah, you're way ahead of me there. I
think he's one of the most interesting names for sure. I mean, he's the one that's getting the Calvin Johnson athletic comps, right?
Yeah, and I'm super skeptical because watch him play. He again doesn't really know how to play receiver. So here's my worry with Nicholas Harbor. He's playing wide receiver instead of tight end or edge because he's also literally, this is not an exaggeration, a world-class level sprinter. Legitimate, has Olympic hopes for 2024. My biggest concern with Harbor is that he is going to get caught with a foot in both sports, but never truly die. If he's truly committed to being a sprinter, he should not be playing football. He should probably cut about 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Factually, the heavy 230 pounds is probably not the optimal weight to be sprinting at, even if you are the world's biggest freak. It's just that's a fact of life. And if he really wants to play football well, he's not a wide receiver. He's a tight end. He should be 245 or he's an edge. I actually think he's best as an edge, and he should be 250. So I do worry about that for him, that he's kind of caught in between the two, and he never fully commits to either, and never turns out to maximize his potential at either. But I mean, just the pure athletic traits. I mean, he's an Olympic level sprinter. That's all you have to say about a dude.
Wild.
And South Carolina has promised him that he's going to play wide receiver. And realistically, how many dudes at South Carolina are getting in this dude's way if he ends up being good? Not that many. It's not like it's Alabama or Texas or LSU.
So one other name that intrigues me. Do you want to talk about Jaden Greathouse at all?
Sure, yeah. A guy that I had, it was one of my bigger fallers through the process, so then now I sort of regret it, but I still have him as a top 15 guy. My worry with Jaden Greathouse is that he's essentially ends up like in N'Keal Harry, because I don't think he's a great athlete. Oh, and that definitely was sped up. He is not that fast. He's got pretty good size. He's 6'2" ish. He was listed at 220 his senior year in high school, so he needs to cut some bad weight. College is a great place to do that, though. This guy, though, just I believe he had 6 kickoff returns for touchdowns last year at Westlake, which is a 6A Texas high school, the highest level of competition there.
Yeah.
He just kind of is good at football. That's the best way I can describe it.
Does not look fast.
No, he's not at all. I literally, he is such an enigma. I do think he could end up being a slot, N'Keal Harry kind of guy, where he's going to sucker us in over the next couple of years with his production, but the NFL traits just aren't quite there. So I think he's really intriguing in C2C leagues, because obviously if he turns out being really good at Notre Dame, you at least have that floor of production for the next 2 or 3 years. In a Devy league, I'm probably not touching this dude. I'm probably letting somebody else take him, because I do think the athletic concerns are real. But Notre Dame, I mean, it's just such a barren wide receiver room. And he had 9 for 118 and 1 or something in their spring game. Probably the best player on the field offensively for them. So he is super. But like, look at it, he's not really even creating separation or anything. He's just good at football. He's just good at football.
You know who I'm reminded of is really David Bell. I think there's a lot of the same. I thought David Bell was great at the catch point, but not anything else, but just he had the ball tracking, a lot of the stuff up there, but just not any of the like savvy or route running. But
like
a guy like this,
he beats that dude clean off the line of scrimmage, like clean on that last click. Can you go back like 20 seconds?
Too far?
It might be the next play here. Oh no, I think go a little further. Sorry. Watch this. He beats this dude clean off the line of scrimmage and then gets caught immediately because he doesn't have the explosiveness to kind of look at that. I mean, just the DB's still right there, even though he just he tries to jam him at the line and whiffs. So like stuff like that just leads me to believe that I just don't know that he's a true NFL. Like I think he gets there, but is he a guy that for fantasy I really care about? I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I feel like he's the kind of guy that has to learn. He has to turn himself into Keenan Allen if he's going to be successful in the NFL level, or turn himself into Allen Robinson, right? He's going to become elite at doing the things he's good at, like ultra elite, right, to make up for his deficiencies, which is asking a lot of anyone.
It's really kind of threading that needle for some of those guys with that kind of skill set. It's just not a bet that I necessarily love to make if I don't have to.
All right, so anyone 16 to 25 that it stands out that maybe you think can be a riser? Like, who are you targeting in that range at value?
Yeah, I love all these guys. I'll toss out a couple of names here that I really like. Keon Brown at Oklahoma. Of all the players in this class that have gotten the Julio Jones comp, I think he is the closest to him. Now, I think there are some things to talk about with him. Like, so he was basically unknown going into his senior year. And then that summer before, he went to Alabama camp and immediately got an Alabama offer. And he went to Oklahoma camp and immediately got an Oklahoma offer. That's definitely not the right guy because he's like 6'3", 200.
Struggling.
I just saw that. He doesn't have a huddle either. I should have also he does not have a huddle account.
Screw me.
He basically didn't play. He got injured like 3 or 4 games into the season. He hurt his foot and he missed the remainder of the season. And he's going to Oklahoma, which they kind of like. There's no real great player there, but there's enough dudes that could be annoying. But he is as good of a mover and player as Adam Randall was last year. For everybody that loved Adam Randall.
Interesting. I really like Randall's freshman film.
So if you like Randall, I think you'll like Keon Brown. And I think there are some, worries that how much does he play this year. But I think he's legitimately possibly a top 5 receiver in this class when all is said and done. And that wouldn't shock me at all. Malachi Coleman, I like going to Nebraska. I mean, another one of these 90th percentile athletes. I believe Brown is too, actually. And he'll play right away at Nebraska. So I like him. And then Vandrevius Jacobs is the other one that I want to highlight. And I kind of mentioned him earlier. He's going to FSU. They basically said that every single 7v7 session they did, he just caught touchdowns. That's all he did all game. He was just catch touchdown. Staff loved him. Staff raved about him. Seemed to have good rapport with Jordan Travis. If they do get Keon Coleman, that's a little concerning because how much does he play this year? But I think he's Devonta Smith-ish. Kind of
interesting.
I'm not quite
that is bold.
Kind of gonna say that he has that high of upside, but that's bucket of player that he falls in. So intriguing guy there. Like
body type as well, slimmer, but just a route ninja.
Yeah, slender, just super loose hips, ultimate flexibility, just kind of gets open. He's a really, really good player. I like him a lot too. And I think our recruiting team actually ended up grading Jacobs higher as a whole than Hakeem Williams. So even though he was a lower rated guy, we do like him quite a bit.
Nice. I love it. All right. So let's go outside the guys that most of us who are semi-casual with the freshmen like myself are going to have experienced. So let's give us a couple of deep cuts that you think you're going to hang your hat on as guys that are worth taking the 14th round flyer, the 15th round flyer, or you really think you're going to gain some traction and gain ADP over the year?
Yeah, I try to do a different name every time I'm on a show and I touch on this topic just to throw lots of names out. But I think this one's a repeat for me. But I really like Jackson Harris. He's a wide receiver that's headed to Stanford. I think there's a couple intriguing things about that. First off, their wide receiver room is name a wide receiver on Stanford right now.
I knew Michael Wilson. That's it.
I can't name a single one, quite frankly. I think he can play early. He's 6'3", 195. I don't think he's quite the 90th percentile guy, but he's pretty close to it in terms of raw athleticism. And he's big, fast. He's fairly technical for his size, and it wasn't a great level of competition for him in high school. But I think he can kind of be like an explosive possession guy, if that makes sense. I think he can fill that role for them. And it's an offense with Troy Taylor coming over that passes the ball a ton, that runs a ton of plays, that gets guys involved. So I think he could be, like, at worst, a really prolific college scorer over the next couple of years once they figure out the quarterback situation, whether it's Justin Lamson or whoever else they end up going with there. But he's a guy that's a deep cut that I think he's rated pretty lowly by the services, but I really, really, really like him.
Interesting. Love it. And Stanford sends people to the NFL every year.
Yep. Him and Elijah Higgins came this year too, although I guess he's apparently a tight end now. So, I mean, yeah, if you're good at Stanford, they'll get you there. I don't have any concern about that.
Yeah. Awesome. You want to throw one more name out there? Or?
Man. Okay. So I'm going to throw this one out with the caveat that I actually don't know that he is rosterable currently. But he's very much a watch list guy. I like very, very much pay attention to him. It's Tyke Andrews, who's going to Oklahoma State. Super lowly rated guy again, 6'1", 180. He's from Oklahoma. He's from like not a huge school in Oklahoma. But he is just an effortless athlete. Like my first note is he looks almost bored at times because he's just like so much more athletic than everybody else. Like super, super, super fluid hips. He's got that dog in him. He's got excellent body control, physicality off the charts. And I wrote like he's a little bit too nonchalant at times, but I think part of that is just like he was so much better than everybody in high school. So going to Oklahoma State is really kind of one of the things that gives me pause. I think that offense is going to be, at least from a passing perspective, atrocious this year would probably be the nicest word I could think of for it. Alan Bowman's supposed to be their quarterback. And it's a weird wide receiver room. Like it's like this hodgepodge of guys that I don't feel good about either way. But I think he's a guy where I think if he gets on the field and they just give him touches and just kind of let him work, that he could be really, really, really good for them. So Tyke Andrews is Tykie. I don't even know if he's on Fantrax. I haven't looked yet because I haven't added him to queues. Like I said, I don't think he's draftable currently, but he's a guy that I just think is like such a fun player that if he ever gets a shot, I'm very, very interested in him.
Not a lot in his way at Oklahoma State, but
no.
I feel like, well, did the other kid, the kid that went there last year, did he transfer?
Shetron?
Yeah.
Shetron's still there. And then I wonder if Andrews is maybe more of like a slot, like a Parker, like DJ Moore-ish slot. Like I wonder if that's his role, or Debo, or whatever you want to use to describe that role. But they also have Brendan Presley there who plays the slot, and they like Brendan Presley. So like, does he start over him or play over him? I don't know. They brought in DeJuan Stribling this offseason. I think they brought in somebody else too. Like it's just like a random mishmash of like where receivers have gone to die. So I'm really hoping that's not the case for him, because I think he's a good player and a really, really intriguing one. If he had gone somewhere else, I think he might be draftable, but at Oklahoma State, I just don't see it right now.
Yeah, not a great record of developing guys there for sure. Austin, this has been so much fun, man. I love it. I'd love to pick your brain for 3 hours on this and just absorb, just osmose the information over through a camera. That would be phenomenal. So what do you guys got going on right now at Campus Canton? What's the plug? I know you dropped most of your guides. Are they all out right now?
2 out of 3 are out. The CFF guide's in production right now. It's been in production for like a week, and they almost have the whole thing written already. These guys, the CFF crowd is just a totally different group of sickos. You know, I know.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just it's degenerate stuff. They're like, I'm writing Iowa, I'm writing Navy. It's like, I would rather die than write either of those. So more power to you guys. But yeah, the CFF guide, that's going to come out the first week in July. But yeah, right now Devy guide, supplemental guide are out. And this is kind of, for me, the lull in my year. I do a lot of heavy writing and editing on the first 2 guides, and then the third one I'm really hands off. So I'm starting to get into the 2024 freshman class. I've got about 25 receivers graded already for next year. Just podcasting a couple nights a week too. So everything over there I handle. So yeah, I mean, that's what I've got going on. Just check out thecampuscan.com. That's all I'd say. We've got a lot of good stuff going on over there.
Yeah, money well spent. I'm assuming most people that are watching this, that are listening to this, probably already know about campus2canton.com, but it's if you're into the CFF, you're into the C2C, you're into Devy, it's a must-have resource for sure. Okay, well, thank you again, my friend. This was lovely. We learned so much, and I really love your passion for the freshmen and scouting it, and sharing all the deep cuts with us. So hope to have you back on again soon, and don't draft all the good guys in our league. Save some for me.
All right, I will see what I can do. Do we play each other in a final last year? We did, right?
I think we did. I think you won.
So we'd already agreed to split the pot. So really, we tied.
That's right.
We tied.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Austin, I came in second in 4 freaking campus occasions last year. I have not yet taken down the college side, but I've been top 3 every year since I played. It's so
knocking on the door.
Just want to win.
That means you're due. Next year you'll win 6 or however.
Due. It's variance. Variance is coming my way.
Exactly.
All right, my friend. I am Eric at EK Baller. If you like this content, please follow me on Twitter. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We need your support. We're going to get those numbers up so we can get some juice flowing here. Austin at Devy Dose. Follow him on Twitter. But more importantly, subscribe to the Campus Canton pod and to their service. It's wonderful. And I bid you all adieu.